my colleagues, Ms. Ziamora, Ms. Priscilla Dickerson, Collection Development Manager Librarian, and also Mr. Frederick Cox, Reference Librarian, are here to assist you, and we're excited. All right.
He's done.
Wonderful. All right, I'm going to go ahead and pull up my screen so we can all begin. Are you all able to see my screen?
Yes.
Wonderful. All right.
Can you hear me? This is Loretta Parham.
Hi, yes, I can hear you.
Okay, but I don't see me listed, so I didn't know if you did or not. Great.
Oh, wonderful. Awesome. All right, we'll begin. Good evening, you all. My name is Forrest Evans. I am one of the reference librarians at the Auburn Avenue Research Library, dedicated to African American culture and history, located in the sweet Auburn historic neighborhood of Atlanta, Georgia. Tonight, we are celebrating and also exploring the history of historic Black college and universities, as well as the film Tell Them We Are Rising, directed by Stanley Nelson. Today, we have a panelist full of colorful individuals. But before we get into our panelists, our library professionals and librarians will be providing reference resources throughout this discussion, paired with specific topics to assist and jumpstart your research and exploration of the history of HBCUs. Tonight, Auburn's librarians are Priscilla Dickerson, Collection Development and Manager, as well as Mr. Frederick Cox, Reference Librarian, and Ms. Ziamora. Tonight's panelists include Ms. Kimberly King, President of the National Pan-Hellenic Council of Greater Atlanta.
Hi. Should I say something now for us?
Oh, yes.
Okay, I know you're going to introduce. Well, good evening, everyone. Excited to be a part of the panel. Love talking about HBCUs, especially as an Atlanta native, where I grew up amongst, as I call them, 6.5 HBCUs, just in the community. Is that I grew up when Atlanta University and Clark College were separate entities, so I kind of combine them and give them a little bit more than one. But lots of great history, and just looking at when I've seen the movie. I saw the movie before it actually debuted, so looking forward to talking to everyone about it. So let's make it happen. Let's talk HBCU.
Well, thank you, Ms. Kimberly. I appreciate having you. And also accompanying you on the panel from Fort Valley State University, located in the heartland of Georgia, from Hunt Memorial Library at Fort Valley State University, also my alumni, we have the Director of Library Services and the Assistant Director of Library Services, Mr. Frank M. and Ms. Agnes M.
Good evening. This is James Scott and Betty Rogers from Fort Valley State University Library. Mr. Frank Mahitab and Ms. Agnes Muriuki assigned us to this project, so we will be participating tonight. So we're both librarians here at Hunt Memorial Library, and we're happy to be here tonight.
We are overjoyed to have each and every single one of you. And last but not least, to complete our panel tonight is Ms. Loretta Parham. She's not only the CEO, but the library director of the Robert W. Woodruff Library of the Atlanta University Center.
Well, good evening. Thank you so much, Forrest, for this introduction and this opportunity to participate. So I am CEO and director of the Woodruff Library at the Atlanta University Center. It is a library, a unique library with a unique structure, as it operates as a shared library. It's shared by the 4 schools at the center: Spelman, Morehouse, Clark Atlanta University, and the Interdenominational Theological Center, ITC. So glad to be here.
Wow, thank you. And we're honored to have you. And to begin tonight's discussion, we're first going to begin with the trailer of tonight's documentary discussion, Tell Them We Are Rising. Before we get into tonight's discussion and question, let's both and all begin to review.
Colleges are spaces where Black people are affirmed.
You could be yourself and develop yourself in this rich soil.
space that is an unapologetic Black space.
These are places for this incredible freedom to explore.
We wanted to better ourselves. We wanted to have an institution where there are people like us all wanted to be more than the status quo.
The question for African Americans has always been, what is education's purpose? Who controls it? What is the relationship of education to the broader aspirations of our people?
Oh. Oh, wow. Just reviewing that trailer, it brings me to the Black experience, which is a collective narrative. And HBCUs are a perfect snapshot into the Black and the African diasporic community and culture. It's actually incorrect to assume that only Black students attend these schools, especially from our trailer with a collection of Black and Brown voices. From a historical perspective, HBCUs have been at the center of and have initiated movements that catalyze and initiate change. How has Black Lives Matter, the movement, benefited from the presence of HBCUs? And could Black Lives Matter breathe new life into the struggling institutions such as Howard, Clark Atlantic, and Dillard? To any panelists that would like to share, you're welcome. And if you like, again, I will.
Can you rephrase the question, please?
Oh, yes. From a historical perspective, HBCUs have been at the center of many movements, not only in the South, but throughout many minority-serving institutions. Recently, Black Lives Matter movement has benefited and also helped to illustrate certain injustices. How has Black Lives Matter benefited from the presence of HBCUs? And could Black Lives Matter breathe new life into some struggling HBCUs such as Howard, Clark Atlantic University, or Dillard?
Mm-hmm.
Well, so this is Loretta. I'll take a quick stab if that's okay.
Yes.
Yeah, so how have, I think one thing is, and I can certainly say this in the Atlanta area, and I would suspect that it's true in other areas where there have been Black Lives Matter protests and activity that had any geographic proximity to an HBCU. I would dare to suggest that there were students that were coming from those campuses who were actively participating, organizing, and other things to help give even a larger voice to the Black Lives Matter. I know certainly on the AU Center campus, a group of students did arrange an event in support of Black Lives Matter. In fact, they did it right in front of the library. The second half of your question about how Black Lives Matter might help, I think I'm going to interpret it as help with the sustainability and the survival of our institutions. I think that other than some cash on the table, I think that largely it is about promoting the story, reminding others of the alumni and the contributions that come from our HBCUs, because oftentimes we talk among ourselves about it, and we perhaps need to do an improved job of talking to many, many others about our HBCUs. And I'll pause. I could go on and on, but I'll pause. Thank you. So.
I'll add something for us. This is Kimberly King, everyone. I would just add that I agree with what was just shared, and this is in a lot of ways I think a perfect storm opportunities for HBCUs. We all know about them. We grew up around them, or either we have friends and relatives. So this is a part of our culture. But I've been excited to see other people learn about them. Most recently we had to think of two recent examples with Kamala Harris's vice presidential acceptance speech, she gave a shout out to HBCUs. And, you know, I'm sure many of us joked that all of a sudden people were Googling what is an HBCU. But now they know, you know, it's no longer a secret. It was on international television. And the social justice movements that have happened, you know, since April, May, you know, well, since the spring throughout the nation have also brought attention to great attention to HBCUs. And you've seen, you probably all remember, I guess it was last month, that Mackenzie Scott, also known as the ex-wife of Jeff Bezos, the world's richest man, gave away, I want to say close to $150 million to HBCUs, including, you know, Morehouse Spelman here locally, Howard, Hampton, and Tuskegee. And and Xavier, I think that's the one I'm forgetting. But in her press release, her brief statement, she said that she wanted to give money to those institutions that she knew could have an impact, you know, impact and work through those organizations that already had the connections, that were already doing work in the community. And she had to know about them, you know, so I'm sure she gets thousands or millions of requests for money, but because of that knowledge of HBCUs. And one thing I'll just add is, more recently, and I don't want to not use the correct names, but a lot of the nation's top tier athletes are opting to not go to, say, like my alma mater, the University of Georgia. They're wanting to go play basketball, football, baseball, whatnot at HBCUs, knowing that if they're good, they're going to be drafted. They're going to find them. They're just saying, hey, I want the rest of the experience. And through ESPN and channels that they have now, you can, well, assuming that we'll be able to play sports in the future, but, you know, now you have lots of opportunities to see HBCU institutions play football on Saturday, just like you do some of the larger ones. So there really is, you know, if you want to go and you want that additional cultural experience, you aren't losing out on anything. The educational quality is strong. So why not?
Wonderful. Thank you both for that insight. You know, that leads me into our next question. If I can go to our next slide. Student performance, as well as not only is representation important, as well, Ms. Kimberly, when you hinted on how certain athletes are now making the conscious decision to go to a university that reflects not only their community, but their pursuit of passions, and that brings a great attention to these institutions. You know, for several years, HBCUs have experienced a decline in student enrollment and budget reduction, resulting in eliminations of programs such as the library school and an engineering program at Clark Atlantic University. At the same time, athletics were left intact and untouched. How does this reflect the overall priority of HBCUs and their longevity?
I think, you know, when I think about it, realistic athletics bring in money. So that's a fact. I can tell you at my school, you know, my alma mater, the UGA's football program pays for every other athletic program at the school. So just through the football revenues, they cover the cost for basketball, baseball, tennis, golf, swimming, gymnastics, everything. So if you have a competitive program, people will pay to see. And it's also a great way to bring people onto the campus to see the campus. And once they get there, you get a chance to talk to them, hopefully more than once a year, like at homecoming. So I see it as a great opportunity. And even, you know, the athletics and the band departments have been trimmed a little bit, but I hope it also motivates alums, and I have my MBA from Clark Atlanta, to give money back to the institutions that helped us to all become successful and productive adults, to say, hey, I want to go to a game and I want to actually stay in the game and not just hang outside in the parking lot, but, you know, I want a good game on the field, right? So if that motivates me to stay in my seat, I'm going to give a little extra money. I'll give another $500 or whatever it is, or match your program. And I think you can, if you use the right way, athletics can be a great benefit to HBCUs. And so many of our great athletes, you go way back, are products of HBCUs. You know, before like the 70s, a lot of them came out of HBCUs. And I say that as somebody who had a father who was a football scout. So I have all these stats in my head, excuse me, but yeah.
Interesting.
So make it work.
Well, also, oh, go ahead.
So I guess I'm going to be the offer a different opinion about this question.
Oh, we'd love that.
Sure. Because I think all of us, and I know certainly excellence and our striving for excellence is important. And it also has to be more than just words. It has to be action, activity. And so I think that, and just I'm looking at the question, how it talks about, decline in student enrollment and budget reduction resulting in elimination of these programs. On too many occasions, student decline was due to changes in the national program for financial aid and support. That had a huge impact on student enrollment at all of our HBCUs, all of the private HBCUs. And so remember that Clark Atlanta is a private institution. It's not a public institution. So all of the schools that I support, Clark Atlanta, Morehouse, Spelman, they do have a much heavier tuition load for families to bear than our public HBCUs. That's true of any academic institution of higher education. You pay a lot more to go to Agnes Scott here in Atlanta, for example, than you pay to go to Georgia Tech. So it's state versus private. And that's an important, a huge piece of this factor. And I think also it has to do with, the examples you give here, to my knowledge, student enrollment was not the issue at all for, I'm going to take up for AUC institutions. The student enrollment was not so much the problem or the issue here, as it was just where the institutions, the capacity of the institutions to stay current and to keep potential students motivated. That's just my unsolicited opinion.
Oh, no, it's welcome. Oh, wow, thank you. And I also did not know that the difference between the private and public, and also how that can possibly change a student's pursuit or their selection of each institution. But I'm so glad to know that UC Center is there as a shared resource.
Absolutely. That tuition differential between public and private institutions will send a first generation or a second generation student of color, if the family has to make the difficult choice, could send them to the public institution because that annual tuition might be half as much. So, there's much to be said and much to be gained, but then there's something to be lost too by not engaging in our communities.
That's such an excellent point. And it reminds me of, I guess, was it a year or 2 years ago when billionaire Robert Smith, became like everybody's favorite graduation speaker when he opted to retire the debt of the Morehouse students, just to see the family's reaction, that being a private school. I'm going to guess, I think I've heard Morehouse's tuition is maybe around $40,000 a year. That's huge. Do the math, and I'll say it's me. I always joke and say that's why one of the reasons my sister was able to get a car in college and I did not, even the Georgia, long story, but I got one, but nonetheless, because my mother worked at Morris Brown College, which I still count amongst the local HBCUs as it works to get its accreditation back, and they're working very hard on that. Part of the, at least when she worked there, part of the HR benefit that they promoted to the staff was that your kids can go to school in the AU Center for free. So we would have had free tuition. Yeah, my sister took advantage of it. I didn't, but free tuition, not room and board, but free tuition. And you think about it, that's like, okay, yeah, I'll stay here. I'll continue to work here. So, and that kept a lot of folks in Atlanta because you also knew you were getting access to some great educational opportunities.
Good afternoon. This is Betty Rogers from Fort Valley State University. And I would like to just give a comment on the public part because we are a public HBCU. But the private institutions tuition are higher and the public is lower, but you have to look at our students are coming from low income families. So by being that, the institution and the enrollment is still going down because it used to be just a rural area that we could go to that recruit students. Now, everyone is recruiting those students, offering more, and tuition is just hard for them to pay here as it would go to a private institution. And plus, the it has changed where our athletes used to be on the lower totem pole, but now they're exceeding more so in academic. And each time we get the organization and stuff, overall, their averages are the highest. So it can go both ways, private or public. It's a struggle right now to keep up enrollment for the students.
Thank you for that. Wow. You know, your range of insight on just public and private, as well as the community it provides that service and guidance is insightful. That leads me into our next video and clip. The clip from Lincoln University, their guide to financial assistance, and also some insight. As you know, financial aid is sometimes one of the biggest hurdles that many students, non-traditional students, or anyone obtaining or pursuing their higher education. So first, before we get into our next question, let's explore Lincoln University's guide.
Hello, and thank you for joining me. Lincoln University requires that graduating seniors pay off all back and current balances before they are given their degree. Students are also restricted from participating in a commencement ceremony. Unadvertised, there are scholarship and grant opportunities offered in the financial aid office. Generally, they are on an at-needs basis and requiring high GPA. Promotion lacks of donors offering students assistance. Here I stand in front of the Student Union building. Financial aid is on the second floor. Staff members encourage all university students to come inside and ask for assistance, but it is our responsibility as undergraduate students to take initiative of this resource and come inside to ask for help. Treasury Whitfield, HBCU News.
Wonderful. You know, some HBCUs do not accept fee waivers to apply. The financial aid offer may not match what the same students would be offered at a non-HBCU, or what many consider PWIs, predominantly white institutions. In this current social, economic, and political climate, what can or should HBCUs do to appeal to high school and prospective students? Well, before any of our panelists begin to share their insight, some of my insight is why I selected my institution is because it paired with my strengths, and also the community and where my HBCU was housed in. I attended in my undergrad Fort Valley State University, and I looked at the history of the institution as well as its leaders, and I saw that they had not only the same similar background, but they had the same humble background as me. And it wasn't necessarily what I had, but how I could build myself with my community and my resources, which is why I engaged not only my library system, but also the professionals there to see how I could pursue my career and what was plausible for me. And so as the video also mentioned with Lincoln University, that students must take that responsibility and also that independence to explore what is around them, and also take that responsibility to make sure that they are satisfying everything they need to graduate, to put their best foot forward. And so again, I raise the question, in this current social, economic, and political climate, how can HBCUs appeal to high school students and perspectives?
So I'll take a stab. This is Loretta. I'll say that just like the PWIs do, and the HBCUs as well, many of them do this as well, that is make a presence in the high school during the year before and the year that a young person is prepared to graduate, because they need to, basically see, feel, hear, touch, et cetera, the HBCU representatives and the experience, because there are so many myths, I will say, about the HBCU experience and education that exist out in the environment. And it's very important that not only the admissions officers, but everyone else, that we do a job of trying to dispel that myth among high schoolers and other prospective students who may not be aware of this community and who may not appreciate yet the culture that the HBCU education can provide. One thing is that I notice on our campus, when it's time for graduation, when it's time for recruitment by corporate sector at least, I mean, without a doubt, and in certain specific majors in the professional degree areas, the corporate groups they know they need to diversify. Well, they're not necessarily going to go to University of Georgia or University of Illinois or Michigan looking to diversify. They will come to the HBCU institution because they know that that's where they will find a mass, perhaps, of students who may be of interest in working with those organizations and those institutions. And I think the other major point that we all certainly know and we've heard for years is do not sell short that nurturing. The HBCU for a student who has had perhaps private education, high school education, or education in a predominantly white school, many of those students, they might want to consider that the HBCU will give them a cultural orientation that perhaps they were not able to get when they were younger in school. Now, that's not always true because I know, even for a couple of my kids, every Sunday we drove a few miles to go to church right in the community. So they'd have a chance to make sure that we knew who we were and from where we came. But I think that this nurturing and the point that when you come on campus of an HBCU, for the most part, our faculty and administrators are committed to not having you fail and to be sure that those students are not overlooked in the crowd, so to speak.
Oh, wow.
One thing I would add, if I may, Forrest, I think about, since I am here representing the National Panhellenic Council of Greater Atlanta, which for those that don't know, we're the umbrella organization for the nation's historically Black sororities and fraternities, or the Divine Nine. And Senator Harris also gave us a shout out. One of the things that we try to do, especially because we continue our sorority and fraternity membership beyond our college years, we are all pretty much committed to a version of mentoring or educational development. And within the city, within Metro Atlanta, I can think of so many mentoring programs that we have. My particular chapter, the Atlanta Suburban Alumni Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta and Taw Chapter of Omega Psi Phi, we partner every year in a program called College 101. And what we do there is it's a half day, and we invite parents starting in the 9th grade, parents and students and guardians, and we start to talk to them about the college experience because we realize there's still lots of first generation folks. We have a college fair, and because we know college fairs can be expensive, we tap into our friends at the Atlanta HBCU Alliance, and we invite them to serve as alums, and they work with the school and they have all the latest and greatest recruiting materials. But imagine you can take the bus or, drive 5 minutes to your same school, and you can be introduced to 30 or 40 HBCUs that can tell you about their experiences. They have their photos, and so we bring it to them and say, hey, this is the kind of experience you talk to some of the folks here. And they can also tell you about the current majors. So I think just bringing it to them. Also, I will give credit where credit is due, whether it's movies like way, way back, like Spike Lee's, what was it? School Days, or more recent ones, Stomp the Yard, and so many other ones that have come through that also, I think, introduce people. And I think it's fine to showcase movies like that. I love film, Forrest, you know that. But to use those films as a discussion piece and say, hey, this is one part of it, but it helps to facilitate a discussion. And you see the nurturing, you see the support, and both of those movies, there's some more shenanigans that go along as well, the funny parts, but you also see them working together side by side to making sure that whether no one drops line or no one fails a class because they work together. And I will say that, so you see those types of things. I think any examples we can use is helpful. And also, and I'll use another Morris Brown example. I noted that I think I read a couple of days ago, the college is launching an e-gaming program or e-gaming major or program. And that's an industry that's hot. The gamers out there, if you want to work in that field, the field that is rising, right? Then hey, that might be a great place to go. Small student body, get that nurturing, and then you're on a path to success because your industry is on a positive trend. So I think there's lots of ways now they can get to them, but to the point that was just made, whatever we can do to just share the information, and then tell them let them see it, let them hear about it. You're probably one of Fort Valley's best ambassadors, because all you have to do is think about your experience and see you just started smiling, right? And how it made you into the fantastic, phenomenal, awesome library professional that you are today, right?
Thank you. Yes.
So,
yeah.
Also, from I would like to make a comment. This Betty Rogers again from Fort Valley. But it's two things that I want to bring out that Fort Valley highlights. It says we are a 1890 land grant institution. They mostly highlight in A. So they have a scholarship.
Oh, yeah.
They're trying to recruit students. They give this $32,000 scholarship, which the recruiters are going into the high school to go into A. And also, we're high in the mathematics, and that's CDF. So with CDF, they offer a scholarship also, but they start grooming their candidates in the 8th grade. So they go into the middle school, and from middle school all the way through high school, they keep track of these students, give them all the A's and different things to entice them to come here. And when they do, they come and they do their time here, then they go and do internship out in the Midwest and stuff with the other big petroleum companies and stuff like that. So by them doing that, it has really increased the number of students that comes here. And also our vet program, we have the only vet program in Georgia, in which that not only entice for the African American, but also we have that diverse group that comes, and when they finish, they have such a vast experience. And I tell them this, I have been working here for 30 years. No, I haven't been working. I tell people, I don't have a job because you get burned out in a job. So my recruitment to the students and things, that they are my bosses. And when you come here, you won't forget the experience, nor will you forget the people that you encounter. Because either you can be a number or you can be a name. So by talking to them like that and offering them that enticement, it really pulls in a lot more students than we normally would not.
Oh, wow. Thank you for each of your insight, especially when you mention nurturing and the community environment, especially when we see that continuation of support with alumni chapters of each individual institution. That celebration and that community experience is important because it can only be obtained on an HBCU campus. Moving us forward a little bit. Celebrating HBCUs and Black letter Greek legacy. As you know, there are many organizations that complete the Divine Nine. And before we get into that, let's first see this exclusive documentary clip from Tell Them We Are Rising.
The founding of colleges for educating colored people is unwarrantable and dangerous interference with the internal concerns of the southern states and ought to be discouraged.
It's happening all over the country. This discrimination, this repression, this desire to make sure that Black people remain subordinate to whites is something that's national. It's not just Southern at all. And I think that we sometimes forget that.
When I was still quite a child, I could hear the slaves in our quarters whispering that something unusual was about to take place. And it meant their freedom. There was not a single slave on our plantation that could read a line. But in some way, we were kept informed of the progress of the war. Booker T. Washington.
As soon as the war breaks out, African Americans flee the plantation. And once they get behind Union lines, they call them contrabands. The first thing they want to do is to get an education. So in the evening, when they've finished their labor, they go to these contraband schools. And as the women say, catch a lesson.
1 by 1, 2 by 2, 3 by 3, and the 4 by 4. Get all the members to read them, oh, read them, let me go. Freedom, John. Freedom, John. Freedom, freedom, John. Freedom, John.
I is anxious to learn how to read so I can study and find out about many things. William Adams.
It is wonderful how people who have been so long crushed to the earth can have so greedy desire for knowledge and such a capability for attaining it. One old woman took her seat among the little ones. She was at least 60 years old. Charlotte Fortin.
They feel that if they can get an education, if they can get knowledge, then other things will follow. This is the beginning of education in the South.
Suddenly, as if at the sound of a trumpet, a whole race that had been slumbering for centuries in barbarism awoke and started off one morning to school.
Before we go into our next film, I do want to apologize for misintroduction of that last clip. That clip was to explore the journey of personhood and also student life of minority serving institutions before HBCUs were erect, which moves us into our next clipping, funding for collegiate institutions. If anyone has anything to share before moving forward, you're welcome to do so now.
The only thing I will add of our Divine Nine, I think I've been mentioning this, 7 of the 9 were founded at historically Black colleges and universities, including yours, Forrest, Zeta Phi Beta.
Phi Beta Sorority Incorporated.
But AKA Alpha Kappa Alpha, Delta Sigma Theta, both sororities, Omega Psi Phi, Phi Beta Sigma, and Zeta Phi Beta sorority, and Iota Phi Theta fraternity were all founded at either the first 6 were founded at Howard, and Iota was founded at Morgan State. So we all of our roots trace back to HBCUs and just that desire for camaraderie, fellowship, academic excellence, giving back to the community. And it says something that we were all founded there, that we flourished there. So it's still going strong today, 100 years later.
Amen. Yes.
Yes.
And also this year, 2020, for those that may have missed, is the centennial year for Zeta Phi Beta Sorority Incorporated that was founded on the campus of Howard University. So this is our 100th year of excellence.
So yeah, correct.
Moving us forward into the funding for collegiate institutions, we have a brief clip from Howard University's WHUT TV's historical highlight of HBCUs. Stay with us as we review this quick clip.
A slaveholder could work a slave to death. He could rape a slave. He could do virtually anything, but teach a slave how to read or write.
As soon as the war breaks out, the first thing they want is to get an education.
They wanted those schools to be as free as possible from paternalism, from racism, whether subtle or blatant.
The Black college experience provides the place to be in the majority. That is such a unique and empowering experience.
HBCU experience has taught me that anything is possible as long as you have that one spark.
Oh, wow. You have to forgive my tears. I am always so overjoyed to look at Black excellence. Moving us into our next question. The United Negro College Fund reports that 20% of all African-American college graduates around the country receive their degree from a historically Black college or university, despite these schools only making up 3% of the nation's colleges. what is the long-term socioeconomic trajectory of Blacks who attend HBCUs versus those who attend other colleges like PWIs, predominantly white institutions?
Okay, good evening. This is James Scott at Fort Valley State University Library. I'm a member of Phi Beta Sigma fraternity.
Hey,
So I'm overwhelmed that Forrest is a member of Zeta Phi Beta. We're the only true.
There you go. There you go. You right.
Okay. And with the long-term socioeconomic trajectory, last week, the alumni, Greek alumni at Savannah State University developed a scholarship program for the institution. We celebrated 30 years last year at homecoming. We presented a check to Savannah State University as Greek alumni, and we started a Greek alumni Greek foundation at Savannah State University to help students who are trying to matriculate there at Savannah State. So that's one of the things that we're doing at HBCUs that's maybe not done at PWI. So we're in various positions. So as we progress in our careers, we're able to reach back and pull other students along who need assistance as well.
Wow, I did not know such great things are happening in the 912. My little brother attends Savannah State, so I am overjoyed to see some of the progressions happening in that corner of Georgia.
I mean, but definitely, I mean, to your point, I think lots of great things are happening. They have been happening, and it's great to see us take notice of it and celebrate it. So just like they founded that alumni council there, even though I didn't attend Savannah State, but when I hear it, I'm proud. I'm happy because I know that we are investing in ourselves, and that's what we're all set to do. And that just makes me happy. And I think one thing about us, we collectively celebrate one another, right? You know, we honor individual success, but we celebrate group success. You know, when you get your next promotion for us, I'm gonna be happy just like it's me. You know, because I know you and I care about you and I want you to succeed, right? So, but that's great to hear about what's happening at Savannah State. And one thing I will add for your brother there, all of Atlanta's mayors, Black mayors, have all belonged to one of the D9 organizations. Every single one of them.
Yes.
So.
You're right. Thank you for that.
So I think that your question about the long-term trajectory, social and economic trajectory of Blacks who attend HBCUs versus those who attend PWIs. So my first response is, inclination to respond is that so much of that, and this is just Loretta, you know, depends on the individual and what the individual brings to the table and what the individual contributes and what the individual is allowed to contribute in their places of employ and in their social communities. And we know that that's hard. I mean, sometimes you can do that more easily than other times and places, for sure, I would say that. But I think that one of the values I would add to that quickly, if I take, you know, that same student and put them in each of those environments, there's something to be said about the graduate of an HBCU. And just like the fraternities and sororities that you're talking about, and I must say, I'm sorry, I am not a member. My mother was a Delta. My husband and my sons are Omegas, but somehow or another I missed it. I don't know what happened. Maybe I was just distracted. But at any rate, I think the important thing that really can help a Black employee, a Black person, no matter where they are, is the network that they have been able to establish with those with whom they attended school. And I do know that that is a huge positive and something that I've watched, particularly with my husband. He's a long time ago graduate of Central State University, but I've watched how that network, when we come together, how we stick together, and whether or not we end up in, no matter where we end up, having that group to go back to who have a shared experience and who know you, having them to go back to help deal with some of the issues and justices and injustices that you face out there once your employment and your career has taken place is really, really, really important. And I think that does contribute greatly to what that trajectory looks like.
Correct. Yes, exploring your individuality, maintaining those communal bonds and relations and that rapport. You're so correct. Thank you for that insight.
Excellent point. And it's so true. Just knowing that you can go home and ask those questions that you may not be able to ask in the broader society. I can go to my people, be it my Delta people, my CAU people, and just say, hey, I'm having this experience. What do you think? And I know I'm in a place where I can, trust folks. I'm in a trusted environment. Trying to think of that movie, the Meet the Parents, like the friendship circle. I'm in a place where I know that I can express myself and get some good advice and feel some love. So that's an excellent point. I can just only imagine when you guys go out. So we'll see that. That's a great point.
Yeah. The family experience and just that family environment is so important and essential to HBCU environment. And not that it cannot be obtained elsewhere, but there's a certain esoteric family environment that is cultivated on an HBCU environment. Proper representation, the documentary highlighted an enrollment decrease and increases when Denise Huxtable attended Hillman, the fictional HBCU on NBC's A Different World, seen in the 80s. This is one of the first historic representations of not only an HBCU, but different experiences on a campus, not only brown and Black voices. How has enrollment affected or reflected historical Black college and universities' prevalence and popular culture?
Just to use your reference, I can remember growing up looking at the Cosby Show, and I remember that Bill Cosby would wear a different HBCU shirt or sweatshirt every single episode. And to the folks that attended those schools, they were always very excited about that, to say, oh, where's that? So I think, he played a big role in helping to educate folks, especially, and him being in the Northeast, being in the South, like growing up in the South, I think you're a lot more exposed because there's so many more of them here. You go to the football games, et cetera, you drive around the state or just throughout the region. But I think he did a good job of bringing those to light back in the day. And that was one of the first things when then Denise went to fictional Hillman, which was, at least according to the stories, was based on Spelman, where his daughter, so he tried to, connect that. And I say again, that creativity coming from a source you wouldn't think that, who would think to get sweatshirts from all over the place? But he did, and it made people ask questions.
You're correct. That also started a trend with Living Single. Not only did, Bill Cosby start that trend, but it also reflected in other Black sitcoms of wearing those, sweaters and shirts. It was very important.
Well, it's a huge awareness. I certainly agree with what you said, Kimberly, as well as Forrest. I mean, I was living in the North, so I'm a Northerner, okay? So I grew up in Ohio, formal education in Michigan at PWIs. But what I will say, I mean, the only thing I knew about, growing up about HBCUs, I'm not even sure I knew the term, but the only thing I knew, I had a cousin, we lived in Cleveland, Ohio, and she went to Bennett. And that's all I know, she went to Bennett. It was an all-women's school. And I knew those of us in the North, our idea of what was happening in the South is that people, students, men and women would go south and go to school, and that they would just dress up every day to go to class. Well, Different World kind of supported that myth. I mean, because you had all the students, et cetera, that were in the schools, they all, for the most part, they dressed. I was living in an environment where what we were wearing were simply bell bottoms and t-shirts. So you begin to look at the experience first through the eyes of a young person in a way that they can appreciate it. And that is the, you know, what you look like, what you're wearing, how you're talking. But the point of the education, which that TV program did a fine job of, again, raising and elevating and creating visibility around excellence. Excellence in the academic program, excellence in the culture of community. So I go back to the point, I mean, those of us living here in Atlanta, I'll say to you, I think that many times out here, you can get lost to the world because the richness of and the experience of color here is not in any other city in the country, except maybe Washington, D.C., and some aspects of New York and Chicago and L.A. But it's different. And I'm glad that these programs promote that experience. And it goes back to my thought about your first question for us, and that is, you know, again, the importance of promoting and advocating and creating visibility around not the myth of an HBCU, but the reality and the excellence of an HBCU.
Yeah. Oh, yes. I love the way you phrase that, you know, and as I see in certain pop culture, new representations like Blackish, you know, or excuse me, Grownish, as we see certain collections of younger millennials pursuing their education, higher education environments, collegiate environments. Do you possibly believe that we would have a similar representation as we saw on A Different World currently, that we would possibly may see that same historical Black college representation?
This is James from Fort Valley. Chris Paul, the point guard he plays for Oklahoma City now. Recently, he has been representing each HBCU, with their with custom-made sneakers that represent a different HBCU each night that he plays. So he has custom designed sneakers for Fort Valley State, Savannah State, Atlanta. He wears their paraphernalia and the custom-made sneakers and represents each HBCU during their time in the bubble down in Orlando. He said this is his mission to represent a different HBCU each night. So if you watch him, well, the games are postponed tonight because of the civil unrest. But if you watch him later this week, you will see a HBCU represented against this team.
Mm-hmm. And I missed the game, Brother James, but I remember reading that he most recently wore the black and gold sneakers of Alabama State. And right. I saw, I was like, all right, Chris Paul, I see you, CP3.
Wow. So our reach extends beyond our community, and that representation is so essential. Thank you for that. You know, now moving into the experience of those still on the campus, the pros and cons of an HBCU, we already have seen the insight of Lincoln University, but Chopin State University, here are some of the pros and cons of an HBCU at their TV show, The Lunch Table.
What's up? It's Rocky here with The Lunch Table. Today we're here at Coppin State asking students the question of the day. What more can your HBCU do for you? And what do you love about your HBCU? Stay tuned.
I love that the campus is very family oriented. A lot of other colleges don't have that family oriented and that communication, that solidarity.
I love the people here. It's more like a family knit, no matter what HBCU you go to across all campuses.
At HBCU, you would think that they would have greater cooks, you know. We need that soul food, but the soul food isn't too soulful here. So
I believe that more student involvement will be good so that we can see more activities come to light.
I like the small atmosphere, like it's easy to get to know people.
More family oriented.
Like we can always get a communication with our teachers. We're not just a name, we are named to a face.
Everyone interacts with each other. Like there's a lot of like quad parties and things like that. So yeah, it's very fun.
It's more related to my culture than PWI. I feel like it's more fun, more experience. Now, what they can change is more financial aid for the students and better food. And yeah, that's it.
Their experience was colorful and thrilling. I also enjoyed the comment about the food. I'm not sure about other HBCUs, but I always knew that my HBCU on Wednesday, we had fried chicken Wednesday. So that was always the day and time to be at a spot. Everyone knew you had to be there for a good old plate of collard greens and cornbread and chicken, or you can go to the Georgia room. So I hope that their experience elevates as they have culinary.
I interrupt you, but we still have fried chicken Wednesday in the Georgia room. And we have an overflow every Wednesday. It still exists, okay?
And the Georgia room is now in the library.
It's in the library.
Okay, see, that's not fair, because where I went to undergraduate school, our biggest thing was shepherd's pie. Okay, I was like, what the heck is a shepherd's pie? So,
same thing you stand in line for.
Oh, Jesus. Let me move. Thank you for that. It's good to know some things have not changed. Those
fried chicken, you can walk out to Jasmine and get your espresso and to keep you awake during class. So the atmosphere of the library has changed completely on the first.
Oh, man.
Clark Atlanta still has fried chicken. I think it's on Wednesdays, I think.
We all got the same president, I think. All right, moving us to our last few questions, cultural influence and legacy. You know, 3 constitutionally established universities in Texas, the University of Texas in Austin, Texas A&M University, and, at College Station, and historically Black private Prairie View A&M University. These 3 institutions share excellent fundings from the state of Texas, which is around a total of $13.8 billion permanent. On the annual basis, Prairie View A&M only receives roughly 9% of a payout from the PUF funding, yet the other institutions receive over 91%. What can be done to remedy the racial divide between inequalities between HBCUs and PWIs, public white institutions? And again, if you'd like, I can repeat that question. The 3 constitutionally established universities in Texas are the University of Texas at Austin, Texas A&M University at College Station, and the historically Black Prairie View and A&M University. These 3 institutions share excellent funding from the state of Texas, a total of $3.8 billion permanent university fund. On an annual basis, Prairie View A&M only receives 9% of the annual payouts, compared to the other institutions that receive 91%. What can be done to remedy the racial divide of inequality?
Well, I'll tell you my thoughts. They're quick. I would say vote, so you can put people in the legislature that are aware and knowledgeable and supportive of your institutions, so that when it's time to discuss the state budget, the folks on the education committee, whatever they may call it in Texas, to say, whoa, they're all 3 state institutions. We need to fix this balance, or even, fix it for a couple of years so the Prairie View gets probably some back owed money, so to speak. And the other thing, quite frankly, that a lot of the larger universities do is they hire lobbyists and, hire folks to work in government relations. And they go both to Capitol Hill in DC and Atlanta. Texas would be in Austin, but here under the Gold Dome. And they are, and you certainly, and you can register to become a lobbyist. There's no special training process. You could go and talk to those legislators and understand the process, understand how they're founded. So, one of the things we always talk about is, being engaged voters, with just understanding that process. How does the state budget get done? So I think part of that is an opportunity for us to learn about that and then say, hey, I want Fort Valley to get money. Therefore, when the doors open in January, and they start the next legislative session, we need to be there. We need to make sure, and you guys probably do this, but we need to make sure we have an HBCU day in the state capitol. So as they're going out to have their lunch, then they can't help but see you, and we can tell them we are rising and say, hey, before that budget is signed off on, that we need some more money. Like I said, I love my school, but I know that we've received a lot of the money over the years, and I do think it should be more equitably distributed. But part of it's just getting to somebody's face and also changing the composition of the folks that vote on it. You get folks that know about your institutions, and guess what? Maybe things start coming your way. So I think there are a couple ways to deal with that issue.
And always to reiterate what you just said about having a day. Fort Valley is, like I said, mentioned before, we are 1890, but we also do not receive them as the 1862. So the UGA is because the state have to match, the federal government doing their part, but the state have to match their other half of it. So the state is not allocating that to us. So in February, we do have a day in the Capitol where we go and lobby and stuff, and bring their awareness about Fort Valley State University.
And I'm sure it's great. And I think about not just only you guys, but every single Fort Valley graduate and fan throughout the state, because Georgia has 159 counties, right? We're elected legislators from all those places. So if they're getting encouragement from throughout the state, left, right, sideways, and maybe that's something to think about, just making sure all the graduates are also talking about it. I can tell you too, as a member of Delta, when we go to the state capitol and to the nation's capital, talking about HBCU funding, that type of stuff, those are typically some of the issues that we bring up when we meet with our legislators. So, but yeah, I just say, just keep at it and make sure that all the alums know, so that we can help all collectively get the word out, but kudos on having a day. And I'm sure you see that makes a big difference. Just being able to remind them that you're here and you are a state institution with a strong history and lots of promise, but you need money just like UGA needs money. Yeah.
I think that this is, Loretta, I would, in addition to all of those comments, which are exactly right, I'm representing kind of the administrative and governance side of the house. I think also that it's important that these boards of trustees of these institutions, of our institutions, spend more time on issues of strategic importance, such as the state share of support for our institutions, as opposed to perhaps getting too close to day-to-day operations. That's why we hire presidents and provosts based upon their knowledge and experience to run those institutions. Those boards of trustees in most cases are some very influential people. They include alumni, and they are constituents. And just as Kimberly was saying, you get that state senator, that state congressman, that state representative rather, we find a way to remind them that these are your constituents, and that these constituents represent a return on investment by the state, and that will come back to the state. Then you begin, they might begin to listen, because that's what those R1s, those research institutions, those large ones do. They've got those strong alumni groups, and most of them are good old girls and good old guys who, who are lunching and golfing, etc., with the folks in the state. And so while we need, that truly is an area as a way to try and influence. I'm all for the public displays of support and parades, etc. But I think it's critically important that the relationships and the conversations are happening at a one-to-one level with those state reps, so that they will not forget. I think also, I would say on the federal level, you have the White House Initiative, which is supposed to be a program which supported by the White House, it's a historical program, and it was set up not by our current person in the White House, but by an much earlier president. But it was set up, and the idea, I think that many people think that the White House Initiative gives money out, and they really do not. They are not resourced to do that. What the White House Initiative does is really, it should do, or per their charge, is that it says to the various departments that those departments should make an effort to, and they don't use this language, but I will, to provide a certain quota of the work and business and program payouts that occur in a department to an HBCU institution. So it's an advocacy initiative more than anything. How wonderful would it be if even at the federal level, the White House Initiative became not just an advocacy platform, but that it really became a model for a way to even out the disparities between the state payments.
Thank you, Ms. Parham. I appreciate that. Prioritizing advocacy, politics, and also lobbying is important to assist with that, the balance of funding, as well as providing a fulcrum for that representation that's needed not only on a one-to-one level, but between administration and the community. Thank you for that. Moving us into our last question of tonight is the support and celebrating the legacy of HBCUs. Before we get into one of our last few questions, let's quickly review this clip from Tell Them We Are Rising in partnership with Independent Lend.
Black colleges were redefining what it meant to be Black in America.
Laws existed that prevented African Americans from learning how to read.
Who gonna control our education? Are we gonna let white folks control it or Black people?
Despite the violence and intimidation, the Black colleges have survived. Black people were in charge.
If you come here, you will find something you won't find anyplace else.
Tell them we are rising.
HBCUs and minority serving institutions reflect its community. The same can be said about a library's collection, which also reflects its community that it serves, provides research guidance, a list of other amenities. Walk us through what proper support and appreciation looks like for an HBCU.
Well, I think we've been speaking to it all evening, what that proper approach and celebrating looks like. And through all of the very diving questions you asked and the answers that I and the other panelists have provided. I mean, we really put the issue out there. I think one important area that I would want to add to the list from our responses this evening is the need to develop more of a giving culture among the African American community, such that we give to HBCUs. We don't give. I mean, you could do a real study on the giving back by alumni of HBCUs, and there is a huge difference between in that data. And I don't have it on my mind to share at this moment, but it is significant. By and large, we don't give back to our schools. And it is giving back to those schools that those PWIs, again, I'm going back, that's where they establish, their platform. That's where they get their clout. Because as you know, when you write a grant, for example, or you go out to secure external funding, the first thing that any grant maker or funder is going to say, well, what have you done for yourself? And so the question is, what have you done for yourself? What has your community done to help build resources? And it is very hard for our presidents when they go and they are unable to present data which shows that we are significantly supporting our own institutions. So that they will understand we're not there with our hands out because we are doing for ourselves. Mm-hmm. So I think it would be, it would be important. In my career, I worked at Hampton University for several years as library director there. And the one thing I remember that the president of that institution used to do, and I think many others do this as well, when the student graduates, on graduation day, they immediately have them take a pledge and they become members of alumni. And then the president immediately starts to talk to them about the importance of giving back and that you do this every year throughout, for as long as you live. That's the best way, one of the best ways, I think, to celebrate and sustain the legacy of our institutions.
Right, you're correct. The Sankofa effect, the art and the act of giving back, you're so correct. I hope that with tonight's discussion that expedites or charges others to begin to explore how they can support their institutions within their strengths.
Yes.
Yeah. I think that was just certainly a jewel of a comment, and it's so true. Because a lot of times we don't know what to do because most of us don't come from generational wealth. So, when it's not been something that you're seeing your parents or your grandparents do because maybe they didn't have it, they're not aware of just giving back. I think, again, I'll just say growing up, I think Morris Brown had a club called the TAY Club, and I think it was $1,000 a year. So growing up, that just seemed like such a huge amount of money, but just to be a part of the TAY Club, they celebrated them everywhere. And so I'll go back to, I'll mention when our alumni do give back or other groups give, let's celebrate them. Let's tell those same stories. Just like we do anything else, say, let's celebrate this, the class of 2005 or the Sigmas from Fort Valley or at Savannah State. Let's celebrate them and say, hey, folks, we're able to do this because these folks who also have great love for our institutions are giving back. If you want to see these great works continue or see more students like you come and join us, when you're out of here, we want you to give back too. So talk about it and celebrate it in a way that's not overbearing, but let folks know, hey, this is how it happens. This is how it works. We have to invest in ourselves. So definitely that made me that warmed my heart to hear that.
Yes, thank you. And also, as a reminder to all in attendance and on the sound of my voice, there are resources paired with tonight's discussion. So if you'd like some insight on how to give back, as well as each institution that we've mentioned, as well as Morris Brown, be sure to review our comment section on all platforms where you can have access to these resources. And again, tonight's discussion was over Tell Them We Are Rising, a film with the production and in collaboration of PBS. Tonight's film is not only available on Hoopla, available within Atlanta Fulton Public Library System, but also on all platforms, Google Drive, Google Play, Amazon, and a list of others. We have a film guide paired with tonight's discussion and a list of amazing resources tonight. In addition to Auburn's reference librarians are here to provide you a wealth of information and assistance. Again, I am overjoyed and honored by the presence and contributions and insights of tonight's panel and each individual that has participated and enjoyed tonight's discussion. I thank every panelist and every attendee for joining us tonight. Your participation and your presence simply is essential to us at Auburn, and we appreciate your insight tonight.
Thank you for the opportunity to participate.
Oh, yes. Thank you for coming and being part
Love
of
our
it.
HBCUs.
Yay!
Oh, yeah. Well, thank you. Well, once again, we have reference resources in our comment section and also paired with tonight's discussion. We've appreciated you for tonight. Be sure to follow us on all of our social medias. And if you like additional resources, be sure to contact our official website at afpls.org/AARL. Until next time, enjoy your evening.
Bye, Forrest.
Great job, Forrest. Okay.
Great.
Take care, everyone. Okay.
You all too. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.